Morning, everybody, and welcome to this morning's session. This is the second session in our Sporting Heritage Welsh Significance Programme series. Our first session ran a fortnight ago, and I know that some of you were there and focused on collection review. This is our second session, which is looking at the actual meat of doing a significance audit. For those of you who I've not met before, my name is Fran Stovold, and I'm the Workforce Development Lead for Sporting Heritage, and I'm joined by my colleague here, Dr. Justine Reilly. Justine, do you want to just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the overall significance programme?
Yes, thanks, Fran. Hi, everybody. So I'm Justine. I'm the Director of Sporting Heritage. And the significance activity and the work that we're going to talk about today has come out of a Welsh Government funded programme that was looking at how do we translate the wider significance programme that they has been doing into sporting heritage activity. So we delivered a pilot project last year that worked with a few different organisations that was taking them through the process of measuring significance. And it sounds like a really difficult thing to do, and it sounds really unwieldy. But what we think we've achieved is a process that helps organisations, whether they be museums or whether they be sports clubs or governing bodies, whoever's got a collection or even one or two items of a sporting heritage, to take that through that process and work out what the significance is on a lot of different levels and what the gaps are, because this process isn't just about saying, right, there we go, that's the significance of this collection or of this object. It's about what have we got here? What does it tell us the significance of, and what don't we know yet? And then being able to use that to inform your next steps work. So that's kind of a background of what we're trying to do. We're trying to make sure that it's really straightforward and easy for organisations to use. And hopefully this session will help you feel comfortable to do that.
That's a big aims for an hour's session, isn't it? So thank you for providing that background. Just before we get into the main session, I'll just do a quick bit of housekeeping. We are only running for an hour, so I'm afraid we don't have the opportunity to do a once around the screen to let everybody introduce themselves. So do introduce yourself in the chat. I'm going to run through a slide deck, but we will pause for questions as we're going along. But if you do have questions, put them in the chat, and myself and Justine will pick them up as and when we can. And I'm hoping that we may have a few minutes at the end of the hour to pick up anything we haven't covered. Closed captions are enabled for this session, so if you would like to set them up, it is the CC in the little round square box, and it should be along your Zoom controls, either along the bottom of your screen or on the side of your screen, depending on how they display. We are recording today's session, so you're welcome to keep your cameras on or off, whatever you're most comfortable with, and an edited recording will then be available for yourselves and others to watch via the Sporting Heritage website and on our YouTube channel. If for any reason you have any difficulties with your IT and drop out of the session, I'll keep an eye on the waiting room and let people back in as and when they need to. So I think that covers all of our housekeeping. So I'm going to jump straight in and work through the slide deck. Just bear with me one moment. So we've had a background to the programme from Justine. So in our hours session today, what I'm hoping that we will all leave with is an understanding of the principles behind assessing significance, some practical steps and ideas and tools using the templates that we've developed as part of our programme on how you can plan and undertake the audit, and then how you can use that audit into developing your own significance statement. So I thought we'd start off so that we all have the same understanding. So what do we mean by a significance audit? A significance audit is a structured process. It will help you, if you work through the structure, to manage and care for our collections better, help us better understand how we can use our collections with communities, whether that's those who play your sport, whether it's those in your local area, or whether it's people who've just got an interest in your sport for whatever reason. And it will help us advocate for our collections and investment, whether that's financial, whether that's staff and volunteer time, whether that's resources. It will allow you to build a case for investment in your collections. And this is some of the feedback we've had. Andrew and the Museum of Welsh Cricket were part of our first pilot project, and that was part of his feedback from them having gone through the process. So we talk about it as a process, but what does this process involve? It's an auditing process, so it will ask you a whole range of questions. So starting with basic ideas, why do you hold the collection? What is the meaning of your collection and who does it hold meaning for? On the surface, simple questions, but once you start digging into those, you may find that actually the reasons behind all of that are actually quite complex. And you may have people, once you gather them around a table, who have overlapping answers or answers that are opposite to each other. So then there's discussion that's needed so that you have an agreed understanding. As part of the auditing process, you will need to draw on all different aspects that give your collection meaning, and they're just a few listed there. It's also, we will look at significance from a geographic point of view as well. So you'll be looking at the two different sort of lenses, the sort of artistic side, the historic side, but then also geographic, so local, national, international importance as well. And when we go through the templates, we'll show you how you can sort of synthesize those together. But it's looking at significance in its broadest sense. So things to consider before you start. We would always recommend that you make sure before you start a significance audit that you spend a little bit of time just prepping that you are in the best position to start it, because there's nothing more frustrating than starting a project and realizing actually you don't quite have all the information that you need. So we would recommend you think about the sort of collection information that you already have. Really, to be able to start this process, we would recommend you have at least a list or an inventory of what you have of your collection. If you have photographs of some of all of the collection, that will be incredibly helpful. And also, if your collection is in an accessible position within your museum, and I know that is not always the case for everybody, depending on the amount of collection information you hold about the items that you look after, you may not need to be going into your store and getting items out. But if your collection information is patchy, which is not uncommon, you may need to go and open up some boxes and look at items or compare items to really sort of get a feel for how you're going to process them through the audit. So it's worth making sure that you've got the best collection information that you can before you start, and that if you need to be able to access your collection, that can be done easily. And I appreciate that some people have collections that are held all over one building, possibly across a different number of buildings and possibly across a different number of sort of geographic locations. So it's just thinking through before you start how you will work with a collection in that state. It's not impossible, but I think you need to just do a little bit of prep around it. Also, that you obviously have the right, well, there is no right number, but you have staff or volunteers who can focus on this as an activity. We will talk in a moment that you can scale this activity to make it as large or small to fit your capacity. But just thinking about who you have that you can dedicate to this project is well worth it before you make the start, and that you set a time frame that's realistic. And again, thinking about how you might scale it if you only have a small team, or you may be a team of one, then we can look at how we would make that project or make the significance assessment realistically achievable for you. And I say, well, we'll talk about that as we go further on. So we've touched on this already. So the benefits of a significance audience, it can help you better understand the value. And by value, I don't necessarily mean financial value, although there is an element of that within it, but the sort of cultural, scientific, historic, all those different sort of lenses that you can look at your collections. So understand the value of your collections. You may be looking to dispose from your collections, or understand that you have lots of duplicates in your collections and looking at how you can transfer those out either to other organisations or for use within a handling collection, or use them within displays. It can help you inform that process. Similarly, it can also identify the gaps you have in your collection and therefore help you come up with a list of items that you would like to acquire to help you tell the story of your sport or a particular sporting event, or the story of a particular sporting person, or how sport has helped your town develop. You may find that there are key items that you want to collect. If you are within a more formal museum environment, you may have policies and documents that support your collecting. And again, the significance process can help you update or help you write for the first time those sorts of collection development policies and procedures. It can also be used to support a grant funder, as you saw from Dr. Andrew Hignall's quote on the earlier slide. It gave them the confidence to be able to advocate to funders about the value of the collections they have in Cardiff. And these are the barriers. These are all things that we're very, very familiar with. So we appreciate that not everybody has a large team, and it can feel like you need a large team in which to undertake something like this. But as I say, we will look at scaling it. Time frame. As you will see as we go through the templates, we've been very aware that people are time poor, but you need to be able to, or you want to be able to do a good job and a good assessment. So we have put in some suggested times and timeframes for different activities. You can then expand or contract them as your resources allow. We've talked a little bit about collection knowledge. We would always recommend that you try and put as much collection knowledge in place before you start the process. So it may be that you need to go away and complete an inventory if it's only partly completed. It may be that you've got partial photographs that are stored in lots of different places. You may want to just do that little bit of behind the scenes admin to bring everything together. We all know what competing priorities are like within our workloads. So it's waiting till you've got the time and the capacity and quite often the brain space to be able to think about the significance, and the same for those that you might want to draw into the process. So it's finding the right time within your schedule, and then also making sure that you've got organisational support for it. So with any of our collection management processes, there are overarching standards. So this piece of work was drawn from drawn from a more complex significance assessment toolkit that was put together for the Welsh Government, and that first link will take you to that. It's well worth having a look through. It's got a huge amount of detail in, but to follow everything that they recommend, although it would give you a very, very thorough significance audit, you will see that it's actually a much longer, much bigger process. We have, as Justine said, made it more streamlined and manageable. And the second link takes you to all the paperwork that we will look at in today's session. And again, if you're within that sort of museum or formal heritage structure, all of our work around collections is underpinned by the Museums Association Code of Ethics. As Justine mentioned, we piloted our significance processes with 3 different museums. Justine, do you want to just talk about the difference between the 3 museums who went through the pilot just briefly?
Yes. Can you see me again? Yeah. So we chose to work with a museum that had a sport-specific collection, one that had a very broad collection, so a local authority museum that had 20 different sports within their collection and not a sports specialist. And then we chose to work with a club that had a really close link with their archivist, the club's archivist, so that we could see what's the difference and what are the challenges as well that different organisations faced. And the collections with the broader sporting collection, who didn't necessarily have that kind of in-depth knowledge about those collections, the difficulty of that came at the peer review stage. So we can talk about that later. And if you're joining the peer review sessions, that's specifically why we have those, to help people who've got that really broad collection to work out how can we do that. The other 2 collections were more straightforward when we came to peer review, because they were focused specifically on individual sports. So it was very straightforward to work that out. But yeah, we're in the process of doing the next stage now, and it's similar in terms of what we're learning. So you can do it with any collection, but there are barriers and differences depending on what your collection is. And if at any point when you're going through that process you need additional support, then come and ask us.
Lovely, thanks, Justine. So from the first pilot, using those 3 or working with those 3 museums, you can read the report, which is on the hyperlink at the bottom of that slide as well, and you can see some of the feedback. And this is some of the feedback we had from Sarah, who was the curator at Torfaen. They were the museum that worked with a club collection around the Pooler collection. a rugby collection. And when I spoke to her about what she had felt about going through the process, she had really liked this sort of structured nature. So that leads us very nicely into looking at what that structure is. So it's broken down into 8 steps. And we'll work our way through the rest of today's session. So we've got another 45 minutes. So I will walk through all of those steps and talk you through what we need to do at each stage. So step 1, it seems obvious, but you need somebody who's going to take the lead, oversee all the sort of administration of the project, keep that overview of what's going on. Your project lead then needs to bring together everyone, it's a bit of a broad term there, bring together everyone who knows about your collection for a 2-hour meeting. So this is where we've tried to, when I talk about things being, trying to make them manageable, we're suggesting the initial meeting, and you'll see in a moment the sort of questions and content that we're suggesting you go through in this 2-hour meeting. We've tried to make it really manageable. There's no good us saying, well, actually, you need to take everybody who knows about your collection away for a whole day and talk about it, because invariably people won't have that time in their calendar to book out. But if you say to somebody, could we, have your time for 2 hours to talk about the sporting items or our sporting collection, it's a much more doable and manageable undertaking. And when we say everyone, we mean within your immediate sort of working environment. So within either your club or your museum. So you're looking at a manageable number of people to sit through a 2-hour meeting. And when you see the sort of questions that we're going through, hopefully that will help you select who could attend. And in that meeting, you work through the first 5 of those 8 steps of the significance assessment framework. So this is step 1, called starting point. And this, I mean, outside of a significance process, I think, even just thinking about these questions is so well worth it. And we talked about it a little bit in our collection review session a fortnight ago. It's very rare when you're in the sort of day-to-day working with collections that you can take this step back and think about your collection in a more holistic way, thinking about where the links and connections are, thinking about what you might like to do with it. Where do other pockets of knowledge, if you had all the time and money in the world, where do the other pockets of knowledge sit with your collection? How could you access those? So this starting point is pulls together some of these ideas. So we're looking in that first question number 1, what is the collection that you're measuring for significance? So you can, going back to this idea that it's scalable, you can just do this process for one individual item. You can do it for a whole collection, or you can do it for subsections within a collection. So for example, if you had a football collection, you may want to, if it's too large for you to broach all in one go, you may want to say, we will do the section that relates to women, or we will do the section that relates to a particular series of competitions, or the collection that focuses on a particular cohort of players. So you can choose how you break it up, because whether you do it for one item, a subsection of items, or the whole collection, the process is exactly the same. So then you can see in questions 2, 3, and 4, it's asking about condition. Can you, is it accessible and in a good enough condition that you can assign significance to it? Who are your stakeholders? Question 3 is the one that may sort of get your brains ticking over a little bit more. So why do you want to measure the significance of your collection? How will you use the outcome of this? So you need to think at the beginning, are you doing it for a funding application? Are you doing it to advocate for more staff time, more investment from your parent body? It can be a combination of those. It doesn't have to be just one thing, but being clear about why you're undertaking the assessment at the start will help shape your answers further on. Step 2, again, as I say, it's a really worthwhile opportunity to pull together collection information, which quite often is held across a whole organisation. It's in my experience when I've been working with museums, not all collection information is held in one place. In an ideal world, it would all be in your collection management system, or it would be in a list or in a spreadsheet or written down somewhere in a folder, but quite often it's held amongst a number of people. So going through a process like this gives you that opportunity to draw that collection information together, which will be vital for not only the significance process, but also other collection related activity later. So it's the very sort of what, where, why, where, how. So you've got location, size, what does the collection cover, which sports, tangible heritage, so things that you can pick up, physical items, intangible heritage. So we're looking at oral histories and film and any sort of memories work. It may be that you've got films of people singing songs that relate to your sport, or different traditions. Looking at your condition. Is it complete? You may have a really valuable, important collection, but you may have a part that's missing. So it's important to sort of articulate that at this point. And then pulling out key individuals or communities that relate to your collection. So steps 1 and 2, pull together that collection information. The final part of this collection it's almost like your foundations of your significance audit is starting to think about the context. So here we're looking at, where does your collection fit in with the story of your sport? Where does it fit in with individuals? It could be particular key events. It could be technological advances. It could, where does the collection fit with that story? Have you had any peer review input before? Are there other places that collect that hold collections or information about your sport or particular people who played in your area? So it may be that if you hold for example, a collection all around tennis, you may want to look at whether any of your players have had a link with the All England Lawn Tennis Club at Wimbledon, or it may be that they've played at county level, or your players then might have gone on and played a completely different sport. It happens quite often that you have somebody who excels in one sport and then partway through their career they go and change and do something else. So it's mapping out those sort of threads that might run through your collection. And then the final one on this table is the geographical context. So looking at whether you're telling a local, regional, national, international, or just UK-wide story. And we'll come back to how you use that sort of geographical framework a little bit later. All of these documents are available on the Sporting Heritage website, and the link is on that earlier slide. You will see they're all set up as Word documents in this sort of tabular format. All the spaces look very small and manageable, but I think once you start thinking about your collection, the documents will expand and expand, because hopefully you'll have lots of content to put in there. So as I say, those first 3 steps are really sort of the foundation to you actually undertaking the significance audit. So step 4 is the actual assessment itself. So here you will see down the left-hand side, we have a range of different ways that you can look at your collection. So we've got historic, social, artistic or aesthetic, and then suggested questions. So you can work through these within your 2-hour meeting and complete the answers on the right-hand side. There are more to consider, so I'll just go on to the next slide. So here we have sensory, scientific research or technical, community value or impact, provenance, rarity, and then sort of representation. And again, there are prompts all the way through, and it may be that as you are going through your discussions, there are other questions that you come up with and that you answer. So you don't have this is not an exhaustive list. It's to get you started. And if you just had time to do the prompts that are in the spread in the table, you will have enough to cover. But don't feel that it limits you, because there will inevitably you will start a discussion in one point and it will wander off to different places depending on the knowledge that you have sat around the table. And then the final one in this assessing against the criteria is, what is its use within sort of interpretation and display? Justine, can I just ask you, when you've worked alongside the people within the pilot, how did they find working in this way? Was it something that they had done before, or was it new to them?
It was generally fairly new across the whole criteria. Those first three sections were really, and are, when we're doing the project this time, really, really important in terms of just getting to grips with the collection and thinking about it in that context and understanding. Yes, just starting to begin to understand, well, what does that mean in terms of significance? So that's really crucial to do those first three parts. And you find that you repeat yourself quite frequently because there's a lot of crossover between historical significance and social significance, and that's absolutely fine. And so it's trying to say we need to capture everything that's significant about our collection, that what we know in this area. And there are some parts of the criteria that are more straightforward than others. So I'd say aesthetic and scientific criterias were more challenging. There were kind of tangible things where we were thinking, actually, you could show through rugby vest, for example, you could show the changes in fashion. But at this moment in time, the collection doesn't show that in terms of its significance. So it's each stage going back to thinking, yes, we could do that in future, but what does our collection show now? What does it tell us about the significance now? And then using that as well to go, actually, what are the gaps? What are we missing? And I think this process, the actual looking about the criteria, was where the different organisations that we've worked with have been able to go, we're missing gaps there. We didn't realise we hadn't got that, or we did, but we weren't quite sure how to articulate it. And I think that really, really helped to pull out what they wanted to do next, as much as what does our collection tell us in terms of significance now?
Brilliant, thank you. And just going back to that idea around sort of scaling items with the museums that went through the pilot projects, Justine, did everybody do it from a collection wide approach, or did anybody break it down into subsections? What was their experience around that?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what we have now. So yes, they've all used their sporting collection, but when you consider um particularly for the museums that are local authority or that are using, it's still part of their collection. So they've got quite a big collection, but the sport collection is quite small within that. So they are then looking at how can they use that process across other collections within the museum. When it's just a sports club collection, obviously they've just focused on that and they've had the records in place to be able to look at the whole collection. And the Museum of Welsh Cricket, they looked at their whole collection as well, and again had really good records, so we're able to go through the whole process. Excuse me, and they used a team of 5 or 6, I think, in terms of their assessment process. So brought in lots of different knowledge to be able to do that whole collection. Whereas some of the others are just one person in a museum. And so the sporting collection has been smaller, but they focused on it themselves and then using the peer review to go out and get those meaningful kind of responses. But yeah, so I would say it's really crucial at the start to think, how much time do we have? Who knows about the collection? Is there anybody else that I want to have in this room to start talking about it? And just being realistic, but also not being frightened by it and thinking, oh, well, I don't have that, so I can't do it. The best thing is to go, do you know what? It might not be perfect, but I'm going to go through the process and I may need to do it again next year, but it's so important to do it. We've got the collections at a stage where we can, so I'm just going to go ahead, give it a go, and then use that to learn for the next time.
Mm. Yes, I think that's picking up on a really important point, isn't it? It would be lovely to think go through this process once and you have your significance statement that lasts forever and a day. But we know that one, that collections evolve and that our understanding and knowledge around the collections evolve, and that this going through the significance assessment process is in itself a tool to help you plan and grow your collection and the knowledge that sits around it. So it is essentially part of an iterative process without wanting to make it seem overwhelming. And that's one of the reasons why we've suggested that initial meeting is just 2 hours, is that so if you want to repeat it the following year or on a 2 yearly basis or put it within your 5 year plan, you can go back and know, right, when we did this last, this is the amount of time it took us, these are the people we had involved, this is what we got out of it. Let's go back and do it again, and slightly tweak who's involved. We now know there is a new, somebody who knows about the collection, or somebody who knows about the area, or somebody who's got a real strong sports background. So things change and evolve constantly, both in terms of sort of the people at your disposal, and also hopefully your collections will evolve. So without wanting to put you off and talk about going through this for a second time when you've not even been it through the first time, it's thinking about, as Justine says, it doesn't have to be that one-off perfect process. Use it as a tool that then helps you in your work going forward, and then think about revisiting it to sort of show that development. So I just wanted to pause there and just see if anybody has any questions. Let me just have a look in the chat. So Justine's put our toolkit link in the chat. I will just add in the link to the recording of the first webinar in this series. Has anybody got any questions they'd like to ask before we move on? You're welcome to take yourself off mute or put your hand up, whichever works for you best. Give everybody a moment just to think. Teresa, were you going to say something?
I was. I don't know if you can actually see me, and I'm looking at two screens, so you're probably.
I'll stop the share so that we can all see each other.
Hello, hi.
Hello.
So I'm Justine Reilly, and I work with my colleague Katie Small, who's actually on this call with us, and we look after the National Basketball Heritage Collection at the University of Worcester, just so that other people are aware of that. So I was just going to say that quite a lot of this you sort of do, but patchily. So I think the beauty of this is that it's so clearly set out, and it's in such an organised way, and it builds on previous things that you've assessed and investigated. But I do think probably all of us have done bits of it. I mean, we've done some listing, we've done, Katie has done some cataloguing, but we're not fully aware of actually everything that we've got. So it's that kind of, because in the process of managing something and making it accessible to people, you do have to do some of this already. Otherwise, what's the point in having the collection? So, and I think if you were starting with a brand new collection, this would be great to do right at the beginning. But actually, for most of us, it's a bit of a mess already, isn't it? We've got some stuff that's done properly, some stuff that absolutely isn't. And I'd just be interested really to hear what other people think about that, in terms of, that kind of really clear way of using the significant audit, which I think it just is fantastic. It's clearly a very useful approach. So I'd be interested to hear what other people have got to think about it as well and say.
Lovely. I'm glad it seems a sensible, logical approach to it, because I think that was always behind your thinking, wasn't it, Justine, when you were putting the framework together? And you're right, it does hopefully draw together a whole range of existing knowledge. You might not, as Justine said, you might not have all that knowledge to fill in all those gaps, but a lot of it you will have covered in other collection work. Justine, is there anything you want to add?
I mean, that really, yeah, I totally, Teresa, I think that's what comes up when we were taking people and still taking people through the audit, that the knowledge is there. They already kind of know about their collections. They already know probably where the gaps are too. But having that time to sit and think about it, and I think definitely one of the organisations was really, really clear about, had we not have done this, we would never have given ourselves the luxury of time to think about it, and then that would have meant that they wouldn't have focused on that collection, and they now are using that collection as a real huge theme in their refurbishment, because they've recognised, crikey, this is like telling the story of the city, this is so important to us, and we were kind of just not really aware of it before. So it's hopefully giving people a really realistic way of being able to look at the collection, just sit back and go, right, okay, we can do it, but it not feeling like it's this massive, long, onerous thing. I was really I was really keen to make sure that it was practical. And if I was thinking, right, I've got to allocate some time to it, I've got to do this project, what would make me go, it's okay, I can do that? And that's what we've tried to kind of achieve with what you're seeing now.
Mm. And is anybody, just picking up on Teresa's interest, is anybody else thinking that they might undertake this sort of work, or have some of the collection information already in place that would allow you to have that sort of slight head start on starting your significance audit? I'll take that as a not quite yet. Right, I'll dive back into the slide deck and we'll continue the assessment process. So just before we broke for our discussion, we were talking about looking at the assessment across those different sort of lenses that you could look at your collection through, whether that's a sensory one, whether it's the scientific one, whether it's the aesthetic one, whether it's a historic one. Oh, excuse me. The second sort of the companion piece of assessment alongside doing this framework or this element of the assessment is, slide deck to move on, is looking at where it fits in your story across local, regional, national, UK-wide and international. So you'll see along the left-hand column, you've got all the headings that we've just looked at, and then you can then assess those across that sort of geographic spread. So you've got your comments already around all your topics on your left-hand side in a very sort of global sense. Then you can pin it down to where those stories fit within your local community, across your region, across your, if you're a national sport, or if you've got a UK-wide reach. On many collections have international reach as well. So, and it may be through discussing some of the topics on the left-hand side that some of those meanings come out just through those discussions. So this is the opportunity to sort of have those new perspectives and fresh eyes on your collection. For those of you who attended our collection review session, which was the first one in this series, we looked at how we scored and rated collections using sort of letterings and numbering systems. This, as you can see, is a much more sort of simple approach, which hopefully again will make it much more manageable. You've got the low, medium and high. You can decide as an organisation where those thresholds are, and you may want to put together a document so that when you come back to this process, or you have to explain this process to somebody else, you can say, well, actually for a low historic significance in our collection, it has only a small link to a small part of our sport. The medium link, so you can define your own sort of thresholds. A high link would be it's got a really strong provenance. We know exactly where it was used, who it was used by, and it was used at an event that was crucial or key to our sport, either in a championship or to do with the development, however you decide to define it. So I would suggest, as you're going through your low, medium and high, you come to an agreement within your group in your 2-hour meeting as to where your thresholds sit. So this is the 5th of the tasks that we suggest you do within your 2-hour meeting. So you've assigned, or you've assessed against the criteria. You're then assigning the significance using this framework. The statement document here is how you pull all that information together. So as a team, and you then may want to nominate your project lead to be the person who writes it up, but there may be somebody else around the table who volunteers to do it. You sort of bring together the assessment that you did against all of the topics on the left-hand side, and then weave in that geographic significance as well, and write them up in a document. Say the table I have on screen makes it look really manageable, but once you get writing, obviously your document will be longer, and that is your draft significance statement. So in theory, you will have done the bulk of this work within that first 2-hour meeting. The writing up may take longer, and you may need to go back and have a little bit of agreement and discussion with your group, but the bulk of the thinking and the working will have been done in that first meeting. Once you have written your significance statement, we then recommend that you go out for peer review. So your project lead needs to complete the peer review template, which we're going to go on and look at in a moment. Share all of your audit information, so the assessments that you've done and your scoring, with anybody who's been identified as a peer reviewer for your collection. We do have our next session, so session 3 is all about how you build your peer review network. So if you're not sure who could peer review your collection, please come along in a fortnight and we will talk about building your peer review network. And if you think that you would like to be a peer review for somebody else's collection, if you feel that you have the knowledge or would just like to share your experiences as a peer, in the role of a peer reviewer, session 5, which is in mid-March, and I'll share all the links to the following sessions, will be talking about coming into a collection as a peer reviewer instead of actually, being the museum. It's coming in from the other side. We would always recommend that you give your peer reviewers a deadline for completed responses. We all know that with busy workloads, that a deadline helps to get the work done. And we're, again, trying with the idea of trying to make it manageable. Justine, how long did you recommend that peer reviewers spend doing their peer review work in the pilots?
So we're saying that we need to give them kind of 3 or 4 weeks once you get the information to them, so that they're not having to worry about doing it really quickly. And in terms of the information that you give them, giving them I will get to that answer in a minute. So giving them the document that Fran shared, and then you also give them the framework as well, so they can see where you've scored it low, medium, and high. We recommend that it probably takes a couple of hours for a peer review to go through. If you are happy to share your collections database in whatever form that might be, whether you use a museum database or whether you just have an Excel spreadsheet that lists your collection, so that they've got a really clear understanding of what it contains. We know that people don't have the time. Often you don't have the time for them to come and look at the collections, or they may be based somewhere totally geographically different from you. So anything that you can provide them with that gives them that information about, this is what the collection holds, this is what we've got in terms of the significance review that we've created, here's the collection, then a couple of hours for them to go through and look at that and consider it. And we found that the peer reviews have been brilliant in being able to establish and make that significance table really, really meaningful, and pick up sometimes where it's been assigned as a low impact, but actually it's high, purely because of the knowledge of that peer reviewer. So if you aren't sure about the peer review process, I really recommend coming to the peer review session as well, for any support that we could give around that. But yeah, did that answer the question?
It did. And then some. So yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you. Right, so we'll just go on and show. So this is the form that will go to the peer reviewer, or this is one of the sheets that goes to the peer reviewer. As Justine said, if you can share some of your collection information, if you have photographs of your collection, it doesn't have to, nobody expects you to have everything fully photographed. That's quite unusual. In an ideal world, we all would have, but it's very unusual. Particularly if you are a small team or working within a small museum or club setup. So anything, as Justine said, that can give your peer reviewer the best idea of the scope and depth and richness of your collection. So this is the form that you will send to them. It has a sheet that sits before this, which gives an opportunity for you to give some of the opening context. But then on the left hand, the second column, so the left hand blank column, is where you will put in the significant statements that you've drafted after your meeting, and then the right hand column is for them to put their comments in. They can then tick whether they've just straightforwardly agreed with what you've said or whether they wanted to make changes. It's no more complicated than that. Again, we're trying to make it as streamlined and easy for you as an organisation to manage the process, but also for peer reviewers to be able to step in and go, yes, I'd like to share my knowledge. I can see that the process is straightforward. I'm not having to get tangled up in lots of complicated admin. So hopefully it will make it easy for peer reviewers to step in and say yes. So ideally you'd have a number of peer reviewers. Justine, how many did on average for the pilots that have been going through, how many peer reviews have been?
We've said kind of 4 or 5, and it depends on the collection. So for example, the one that had 20 different sports, you could have peer reviewers across those as well as the locality. That's really quite challenging. And I think that's where maybe at the beginning you think, which part of this collection are we going to look at? What can we manage as an organisation? What might we need to do in terms of the peer review? That means maybe we focus on part of it. For the collections that are very specific around a sport, that becomes a lot more straightforward in terms of the peer review. And particularly if there's a sport that already has a national collection associated with it that could be supported, or the governing body are involved as well. There's lots of different ways that those peer reviews can come in. And it's very much around the discussion happening in this meeting of going, well, who could help us, who could support that? But also, are there gaps? When we go out to peer review, do we have gaps? We don't have the people that we can send this to get that feedback. Again, that's okay. Still do the process, still go through it and recognise that and use this process to go, right, we don't have the right people yet. What are we going to do to be able to build that up to support us going forward?
Lovely, thank you. So once you've sent your documents out and your statements out for peer review to your 4 or 5 peer reviewers, hopefully, they will consider it, do their changes or make suggestions or contributions. And as Justine says, if you allow them sort of 3 or 4 weeks to get back to you, your project lead can then list the different peer reviewers on the left-hand side of this table and then input their comments on the right-hand side. You will then come back together as a group. So that initial steering group that came together for your original 2-hour meeting will come back together. So reconvene the steering group, discuss all the comments, because hopefully it's going to be adding to your knowledge or challenging some of the thoughts you might have had about your collection. I love that when it happens, when somebody goes, oh, have you looked at it from this perspective? You go, oh, I just hadn't thought of that at all. And that's the benefit of going out to peer reviewers. You then need to sort of amalgamate your original statements and scoring with those that have come back from your peer review. So it may take a little bit of backwards and forwards and discussion around the group to come up with something that you are in agreement with. Then that would lead to your final significance statement. So going back, so this is the form that you would have completed as your final step in that initial 2-hour meeting. You keep your draft statement, but you then create an updated version which shows all those comments from all those different perspectives, and that is your significance statement. So we make it sound as though it's a very sort of straightforward process. Obviously, there's a lot of thought and discussion that will happen between you starting at step 1, doing all that foundation work, pulling that collection knowledge, which, as Teresa said, a lot will hopefully already exist within your organisation, to getting to this step 7, where you're amalgamating your peer review comments with your initial sort of team comments to come up with your significance statement. But you will know that it has as robust as input as you can at that moment in time. As we say, it's an evolving process, so it's only as good as the people you have around the table and the people that you can bring in as your peer reviewers. But it will be that sort of moment in time so that you can articulate the significance of your collection with the knowledge and understanding that you have. Now, as Justine said, quite often this process will show where you maybe have gaps in your collections or gaps in your knowledge, or you would like to make links and working relationships with other people who can bring expertise and skills into your collection. So we would recommend that you, as a group, you agree on a list of sort of next steps and put them into a planning table. We would always recommend that wherever you can, you make sure that all your tasks are SMART, so that's specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time bound, for those of you who don't know that acronym. And then we've put together a forward planning template that you can respond to these questions and then add any more that come out of your discussions. So then you've got the whole process captured there from start to finish. And this, I think, is possibly who Justine was alluding to. So this is Emma from Swansea. So Swansea was the museum that had multiple sports within their larger museum collection. Yeah, she found the process really, really beneficial, and it drew out stories that they weren't expecting to draw out, and now it's going to be reflected in their work going forwards. So we are now at 21 minutes past. Justine, before I open the floor up for questions, is there anything else you would like to say about the process that I've not covered?
I don't think there is. I think that's yeah, a quick whiz through of what the process involves. Hopefully it's demonstrating that it's achievable and it's a manageable process. And I'm constantly trying to say to people, let's do it. It's every time that we're seeing people go through the process, they're finding it makes such a difference to the way they're approaching their collections. It definitely does make a difference if you have a facilitator going through it and supporting you through it, which we've been able to do so far. If you can make sure that there's somebody that you can assign in your organisation to do that, that's brilliant as that project manager role. If you need to bring somebody in externally, that may cost something, so it may be more difficult. But it's just having that time to sit back and think about it. So yeah, I'll stop now in case there are some questions.
So just so I can finish off my slide deck and then I can take it down and we can talk as a group. So we'll jump over the questions just momentarily. So these are the remaining 3 sessions in our series. So as I say, if you're wanting to think more sort of thoroughly and think through that process of how you build up your peer review networks, do come to our next session towards the end of this month. One thing that we hadn't touched on is creating virtual visits. So as part of your peer review process, it may be that if your peer reviewer is not in the same geographic location to you, you may want to set up a virtual visit where they can view your collection online, and we will bring together all the top tips on how you can set up a virtual visit in that session in early March. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the final session is if you are stepping into the role of a peer reviewer, how you can discharge that role and share your sort of expertise and skills. That's the end of my slide deck. All of our content is on our Sporting Heritage Toolkit. So, and then if you're not already on our newsletter, please do sign up and you will get all the updates from Sporting Heritage, not only about the Welsh Significance Programme, but also about all the rest of our work and campaigns. I'm going to stop the share there. Has anybody, we've got 5 minutes left. Has anybody got any questions or anything that they would like to comment on? Does it seem like a manageable process? Now I've shown you the whole, sort of the whole arc of it. And it may be that if you want to test the process, if you have time and capacity, you could do it on a small number, almost run it like a pilot and see how you feel it runs for your organisation before you embark on doing it. If you ideally you would like to do it as a collection-wide significance assessment, you could always run a smaller version as a pilot. Do you think that would work, Justine?
Yeah, definitely. I think particularly if you're I'm not quite sure what's going to happen. I'm not quite sure how we're going to make this work or if we want to use it. I think that could definitely be beneficial. You're almost building up your own organisation's process of taking forward the significance programme. But yeah, I know it seems like it's so easy to say, oh, that's brilliant, you should do it. But it's every time somebody has gone through the process, it's just been brilliant to see them see the shift in their knowledge, and also that recognition that we do know these collections. We know what we're doing as an organisation. This is just formalizing it, I suppose, in many ways to help people go, actually, now we can articulate why they're important. That's often what's missing sometimes, that ability to say, this is why it's significant, and we can prove it because.
And that's obviously, I mean, as Andrew had sort of put in his comment earlier on in the slide deck, it's your significance statement is a great lever, you know, and supporting document for funders, or you know, for whether whoever you're trying to advocate for too, I suppose, isn't it? Whether it's your national governing body, whether it's, you know, just your line manager to say, look, did you realise that this collection is actually far more significant than we've ever given it time and money for? Or, you know, please consider this in your future planning if we can't do more work around it now. So it's not only a useful document for you as a, you know, those who are working day to day on the collection, it's thinking about how you can then pull together everything so that you've got a really nice sort of finished, polished document that could actually then help support your work going forward.
That's exactly what I was going to say, actually, Fran. I think I can see it being really useful. You know, you put in the hard work to create it, but the spin-offs from that are actually quite exponential, I think. And so, you know, I'm sure we'll be attempting it. It may take us a little while because there's only two of us, and not all of our time can be devoted to this one collection because we have other collections as well. But yeah, I think it's so great. And certainly in using it for justifying, you know, the collection's existence, just that alone, never mind, you know, going in for some potential funding as well, which.
And it may be if you do this around the basketball collection, it will show the natural links between the basketball collection and other collections within your holdings. You know, no collection exists, you know, in isolation, does it? And this is the thing that we talk about with sport all the time, isn't it, Justine? That it's got so many links. It's quite often, you know, you can see it as that golden thread that runs through communities. You know, if you're not the person who's playing sport, you might be the person who's watching it or washing the kit or making the sandwiches, or you live next to the ground, or you see the players or the fans walk down the road every day, or you know, you chat to fans in the pub. You know, it's all part of our lives. And all of that is somewhere in our collections, or if it's not, you can identify it as a gap to collect something that represents that involvement in sport. It's not just, you know, players at elite level, it's looking at all those levels. And so, you know, so many of our collections are around grassroots sports, aren't they? So, and that is that sort of embedded community engagement. But yeah, they don't exist in isolation. So hopefully you'll find some really interesting threads that will pull on it.
And I'm very much looking forward to your peer review session as well, because I think that will be really helpful, because that's often the one you get a bit stuck on, is something, well, who actually is this collection, you know, relevant to, and who would need to be involved. So I think that will be fantastic. So, and thank you very much indeed for today. It's been really very motivating. So thank you.
I'm glad. I hope everybody has felt the same. So with just a minute to go, I'll draw it to a close there now. As I said at the beginning, I will do a light edit on today's recording and share that with everybody, and you will get the full slide deck that's got all those hyperlinks in as well. It will probably take me about a week to turn it around, but I will email everybody with the content and the links to the next session. So do feel free to book into any of those other sessions. They are all designed to be standalone, but you can watch them as a full series or dip in and out depending on where your need is. So thank you so much for everybody joining today, and I wish you a good rest of your Wednesday.